Yeah, we can hang a little bit. They're gonna get stuff set up.
Oh my God, Krispy Kreme, you never had it?
You know, it's constant helicopters.
It's hard to wrap your head around, you know?
So it's been slam, slam, slam all week.
You can sign swear words, right? Oh, good, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Get in my little soapbox.
Yep.
That camera's so fascinating.
I would like to hear a story.
I realized just even being black, when we talk about racism, the first thing people want to declare is their innocence from it. And the fact is that we all live in this racist construct, so nobody's innocent, and that we all have a call to duty. And I think it's the same thing for when we're gay or LGBTQ in the workforce. We all have a call to duty. Wherever you're working, there is somebody from my community there. And we have a responsibility to help make that change, to make sure that the workforce in that space is what it needs to be. When people talk about anti-racism, it means a call to action. It means that you have to really have your own defined space on how you're gonna make a difference. It's about who do we wanna be principally. The scary part when it comes to racism is that people always remind you that, well, I'm not a bad guy. Well, I've never really done any racist act. But the same thing is, if I asked you to put up a list of all the things you did to defeat racism and you still have a 0, well, you're just as racist because you've taken no action. And I think that we have to be clear that it is our actions, but it's also our inactions that can perform our guilt. Well, 2020 was the reminder of who I needed to be in the space of change. No matter what my title is, my education credentials, I'm still black. I'm also proud to be black. And I'm also from a marginalized community being gay. There's a lot of my brothers and sisters out of the LGBTQ community that go through what I call those survival skills. So much that we lose part of figuring out that other side of our sense of self that actually leads to happiness. And it also leads to self-worth, where you have to find a fine balance of, I'm gonna be me no matter what, while it still brings me success. And there's a balance to it. I always tell people this, what's your mission statement? You know, for me, I focus on underserved populations, people who need me, they need a voice. They need someone to speak when they can't. That gets me up every day. And wherever you're working, what's their mission statement? Because they should have one. What's their values? Do you match? Because if you don't, you're probably in the wrong place. And when you find the right place that meets your mission statement and meets your values, and you're also in the right place to elevate your happiness. One of the people said to me, what do you do about the naysayers? And I told her, I don't. I focus on the people who want to win. And that's really been the way it's been my whole life. I've never focused on the people who wanted to tear me down, who had awful things to do against me. But the people who thought that I could be more than I am, I spent every time and dime I could be around them. Anybody that can give me a little hope, I spent all the time I could around them. And that's the space that helped me be who I am. It was all the people who said yes. It was all the people who said it was possible. And I don't know what it is about our habits as human beings that when we find ourselves in a very negative space, that we tend to keep focusing somehow on how do we overcome that rather than what is positive over here that desires our time.
No, that sounds
Thank you guys, this is awesome.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's one of the hard things about winter.
You guys want to look and take your mask?
Yeah.
Perfect. You can just look at me and we'll just talk.
Proximity is everything. And what I think we saw in 2020 is that folks who maybe have not experienced a trauma or toxic stress in the ways that folks from marginalized communities may have experienced toxic stress with a global pandemic that, touches everybody in some way. Because of that experience that we've had collectively, folks are beginning to understand fatigue. They're beginning to understand burnout and recognizing that we cannot continue to operate in the ways that we've operated before. on anti-racism, like, this work is hard. It's ongoing, it's challenging, and because of that, it is likely that in doing this work, you're going to experience fight or flight or freeze or fawn, whatever your trauma response is, you're gonna experience that doing this work. So if we know that we're gonna experience it, this is having knowledge of what that looks like, having skills, tools, resources, practices that can help metabolize that, right? And to stay engaged. So this is about long-term sustainability, individually and collectively, to continue to stay engaged in anti-racism work. This is the soil that nourishes all those seeds that you're planting for your anti-racism work, right? It's cultivating, it's making sure that where it's planted, it can grow. We talk about equity and inclusion and anti-racism and justice. We talk about them often as a journey. When you're going out of town, for instance, you don't just get up and go, right? You don't just buy the ticket and you're like, I'm going on a journey, right? We're going to Cancun, let's go, right? You don't just get up and go. You pack, you get your house in order. That's what healing justice is for anti-racism work. It's preparing for the journey. It's making sure that when we get to those points on the path where the terrain is a little rough and we gotta navigate some things, that we're equipped and prepared to do that. So we have to work with the individual and increase that capacity, but we also have to work with organizations and networks and institutions to structure themselves in ways that help promote that self-care, that have policies and practices that can encourage that process for the individual, right? So they're not being re-traumatized by engaging with the system, be that their employer, be that governments, be that social systems and structures. We hear a lot about microaggressions. We hear a lot about feelings of safety, quite frankly. Am I able to show up in the fullness of myself? When you don't feel that safety, when you don't feel like you can show up in that way, that can be traumatic, right? It can cause a trauma response. It can make my brain say, I'm not safe, right? I need to be looking out for danger. And when you're looking out for danger, your access to the frontal lobe of your brain cuts off. And our frontal lobe is connection, thoughtful decision-making, self-regulation, like all of the important executive skills that we want leaders and professionals to have, right? But when we put folks in a situation, in a culture, in an environment where they don't feel safe, then we can't get the best of them because they are in a survival mode. And we don't want folks in a survival mode. We want folks in a thriving mode. Physical health is mental health, right? Emotional health is physical health, right? All of it is connected because all of it makes up who you are and how you're able to show up. When I'm caring for myself, I know I do this work better. Hands down.
Thank you.
Thank y'all.
Yeah, it was awesome.
Teamwork makes the dream work, right? Good?
Yeah.
We can just go in here.
Okay.
Whenever.
Yeah. Listen and focus on words and not be distracted by anything else.
The core of all racism is white supremacy. I think that when somebody hears the word racism or racist, then, there's an automatic defensiveness. And I think sometimes in that uncomfortability is where we can actually grow. It allows us to talk about the actual systems that keep people caught up in racism and racist acts. People are talking about, restorative justice and transformative change in ways that are, different and important. Abolition is one of those words, like reparations. It scares folks because it makes folks wonder what is the expectation of me in that moment. that is the place that we really have to start, is like, how we have to ask, how do we want to show up? What is the work that we want to do? And then what are the ways in which we can engage that? And that in and of itself, just that thought is action, right? It's because when we think it can happen. We're meeting folks where they are, and we're asking them, what is it that you need to be well? What is it that you need to heal? And what is it that I can do to help you? You know, and that's the action for me. And sometimes that might mean meeting them when they're angry and just being able to listen that, you know, that policy doesn't feel fair and that policy affects me as a Black queer person. If I'm working for an organization and I'm queer and I'm out and I'm doing work as a queer out brown person and I can't go to the bathroom in that organization because there's weird stuff around gender in the bathrooms, then that organization has a duty to step up and help make that change inside of that situation for that employee. But it also takes an ownership. It takes an accountability measure, because first people have to acknowledge that harm happened. Getting folks to feel safe enough to say what they actually desire is that part of authentic connection. It's that part of, do you feel safe enough to tell me what it is that you want so I can go about connecting the resources that I have? If I tell you what my dreams are, my fear is that you're going to squash them. And so what I want to do is create a safe enough space, whether that's at work or at play, that people can say, like, this is what I need, this is what I want, and more importantly, this is what I expect from you. I'm a mixed race person, and I'm transracially adopted into a white family. I live in that intersection. You know, I'm kind of like an in-betweenie. You know, I live in the intersection of, you know, race and gender. Yes, I check these boxes because I have to, but I'm much more than those individual boxes that, you know, I have been labeled in society. And some of those are about boxes that I choose, and some of those are about boxes that have been assigned to me. A lot of folks called me, you know, kind of right after George Floyd was murdered, to say, you know, okay, we understand that thing you were saying 5 years ago. You know, there's a great excitement because people are understanding in a different way. And there's also a great frustration because this is not new information. What could have happened in those last 5 years for you, for your organization, for the people that you serve, you know, had you had the ability to trust Black people before now? Part of that work for me is trying to meet people where they're at. And sometimes I'm really great at it and sometimes I'm not, but that's the ultimate goal for me, is to, you know, find that spot where we can come to an understanding. What is it coffee? Is it that, you know, we don't like snow? Is it art? You know, there's gotta be something that you and I can come together and connect on, and then let's move from there. Now is a real important time for people to really center in on how they want to show up and why.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you. I appreciate y'all. Thank you for the work you're doing.